Welcome, everybody, to another rendition of the Lone Wolf Show. I'm the Lone Wolf, and you're watching www.witchcrafttv.online, and we have the WitchCon special series for the presenters in 2026, starting February 20th, and we have a very special guest backstage. But before then, I want to run this intro clip. Caroline Tully, everybody. I heard a rumor that you were going to be on WitchCon. Is that true?
That's true, and here I am.
So tell me, what are you going to be presenting at WitchCon this year?
Well, at WitchCon this year, I am doing a class called The Minoan Snake Goddess and Altered States of Consciousness. And what that's about is, so the Minoans are the Bronze Age people from the island of Crete in the Aegean Sea. And a lot of pagans have interpreted the Minoans based on quite an early 20th century archaeological interpretation as this sort of feminist goddess worshipping paradise. So I'm going to be looking at that. I'm going to be looking at the history of how the Minoans have been interpreted by pagans, and I'm going to look at how the Minoans have been interpreted by more recent archaeologists. And so I'm going to show a lot of, images, sculptures, and these sort of little tiny artworks, because a lot of the evidence for the Minoans is tiny weeny artworks. And then I'm going to explain how the Minoans might have done their religion. And then if there's time, we will do some exercises in that style. So that so I describe their religion as shamanic. I'm not saying they were shamans, but they were like shamans. So we're going to look at altered states of consciousness and the types of altered states of consciousness they might have used, whether with drugs, without drugs, and things like that. I'm not going to be telling people in the class to take drugs. It's a drug-free class, but I will explain that, when we get to it.
So you've been involved in modern pagan witchcraft since 1985, and you've also been involved as an archaeologist. What came first, your passion for the craft or archaeology?
Okay, yeah. So I didn't get into archaeology till the sort of from about 2004. So I was a pagan for many years before that. And the reason I got into archaeology was two things. It was the publication of Professor Ronald Hutton's book, Triumph of the Moon. And it was also, I discovered pagan reconstructionism on the Yahoo group email lists back in the early 2000s. And so pagan reconstructionism is the attempt to practice pagan religions, say Greek, Roman, Norse, Egyptian, by using the textual and archaeological and visual evidence available. And that's in contrast to what I would call neo-paganism, which derives really from a Wiccan model. It's like Wicca, but without the initiation. So it's and Wicca, of course, is based on a ceremonial magic model. So neo-paganism really derives from Wicca via earlier ceremonial magic, say the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. It has, casting the circles, invoking deities. It's quite hermetic. Whereas ancient pagan religion, well, it wasn't magic, one. There was magic there, but official religion wasn't magic. It was, going to the temples, worshipping, say, the Greek pantheon and things like that. So I was interested in, so Ronald Hutton, first his investigation into British Wicca, which of course at the time caused a big stir because people thought, oh no, he's trying to ruin this for us because he's investigating us. And a lot of people couldn't handle a historian looking at neo-paganism or neo-pagan witchcraft. And what he did was, I guess, before he did that book, we were all relying on histories from our senior members in paganism. And sometimes those histories were correct and sometimes they weren't. And of course, you can have mythical histories as well, and not everything can be historically documented. But Ronald Hutton, as a historian, he was looking at what is the evidence for these particular claims about the history of modern witchcraft. And that upset quite a few people because sometimes he found that those histories weren't correct. Sometimes he found they were. So I became interested in that because I too had been relying on senior members in senior pagans and witches and occultists that I knew. So I was interested to see what a historian who, was in the academic world had to say about that and compare it with what my, the people I knew had told me. And then with the archaeology, so with the pagan reconstructionism, I just kind of accidentally ended up going to, because I live quite near Melbourne Uni, I just started to do one subject per semester from 2004. And then I just did it for so long. Eventually I got a PhD in Aegean archaeology, which is basically the Minoans. And so, yeah, so basically that's a long answer to your question, which is which came first? Neo-paganism, magic, witchcraft came first, and then I went to academia, frankly, to learn more about it, to just learn, and it's particularly to learn about it from people who weren't pagans themselves, although, Ronald Hutton is of a pagan sensibility, but at Melbourne Uni, there's no pagans, they're not interested in paganism, they didn't really know anything about it, so they had no sort of agenda in regards to being devoted to a particular history that supported their identity or anything. Yeah, so basically I just wanted to do that and learn more about it. And because the thing is with me, sorry, I'm just rambling on and on, but the thing is with me, my introduction to paganism and magic and witchcraft was always involved with a lot of study. So the person that introduced me, who is now deceased, David Matichek, he was a big book person, so very mercurial. The Egyptian god Thoth is like my patron deity because I love to research. And people have said to me, I'd rather practice than research, but can't you do both? I mean, reading a book doesn't mean you can't do anything. Speaking of which, I must say, in recent years, when I was doing a workshop at a shop I used to work at called Muses of Mystery, one of the girls in the workshop that I was giving, she goes, "Oh, it's too hard." She goes, whenever I'm reading a book about witchcraft, when it gets to the point that I have to do anything, I just start another book. And I'm like, what? And I thought, oh my God. So she didn't even want to do anything. But I'm saying study and practice are not, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. And also because with, witchcraft and paganism, a lot of people, they teach themselves. So sometimes you might go into a group, a coven, and be taught, but you'll probably do some homework yourself as well. And if you're not in a group situation, you are totally usually self-teaching yourself, unless you're doing, I guess these days you can do all sorts of courses on the internet and stuff like that. But usually pagans do their own research. So it's not like research is not involved in contemporary paganism, or it's, weird or alien.
So I have a question for you when it comes to, let's see, casting the circle. And discernment says that when we cast a circle, like there's different correspondences that exist, like north is for the earth and south is fire and these things. And I know historically in Mesopotamia that's where things were. Well, the mountains were north, so that's where the earth element was and things. Do you think that's the origins of the way that the universal circle casting is, or historically, what's your opinion on that?
Well, it's an interesting question because in Australia, everything is the opposite to the Northern Hemisphere. So, for example, for us, north is hot and so that's fire. And for us, south is cold, so that's earth. East and west are still the same. So I do think definitely one of the great things about contemporary paganism is that it's based in the landscape, and historical paganism as well. So definitely it's based on where you are. It's a realistic, that's why people love it. It's a realistic religion. It involves being in the actual world and looking at what the actual world is doing and the other worlds around us, like the planets and the sun and moon and things like that. So whether it comes from the ancient Near East or not, it's certainly based in the landscape. And I'd say I'd probably know more about Egyptian landscape than Mesopotamia. So definitely the Egyptians, their whole religion is based in the landscape. Say, for example, the god Osiris, he is really the god of the fertile Nile, where the Nile river fertilizes. And, the god who tries to kill him, Set, he's the god of the desert. And, Horus is the god of the sun and things like that. So it's totally landscape based. So in Australia, not only have us colonists come here we've just brought this Northern Hemisphere system. That's why Australians still celebrate Christmas in midsummer, because December is midsummer here, and it's ridiculous. And we have these, we have snow, we spray paint snow on the windows, and we eat these roast meals and stuff, and it's boiling hot. And really, we should actually move not only the calendar, but also things like astrology. Everything needs to move 6 months round, so it's actually happening at the right time. But a lot of people who are not pagans, they don't realize that these things are based in the real world. Like, they don't realize, say, astrology, say the sign Capricorn. One of the reasons for the characteristics of Capricorn is that it was a winter sign in the Northern Hemisphere, and it's not in the Southern Hemisphere. So really, should we move it around? So really, we're having Cancer at this time and Capricorn in June. Another thing you could say, well, also, in regards to the Sabbats and also, say, astrology, there's really good Indigenous Aboriginal Australian astronomy, and they also have these amazing seasonal calendars in different regions. So Australia is so big, every region is different. So I'm in a region where we get basically 4 seasons, but up north it's really tropical, and they just get monsoon and then the dry. Actually, I've never actually been there, so I don't really know exactly, but I know they get the monsoon and they're having it right now. So I think paganism still has a bit of a way to go in regards to moving beyond just transplanting the wheel of the year straight from England to here, because it doesn't necessarily fit. Some people, very perversely, even insist on celebrating a Northern Hemisphere wheel of the year here. I can see why you could do it, and sure, they're allowed to, but it seems a little weird in regards to the actual landscape.
So in your bio, it says that you've been involved since 1985. In 1985, or, preliminary when you first started having this fire for the craft and things, at the time, who were your inspiration for what we would call contemporary pagan leaders, witchcraft leaders? Who were the inspiration of that time?
Yeah, good question. Because back then I didn't know anyone. I knew my boyfriend, who was the one who introduced me. And in 85, I distinctly remember going, wow, imagine if I ever met any other people who are interested in this topic. And now I know so many people, it's like unbelievable. So my inspiration at the time, well, basically he told me to get The Spiral Dance by Starhawk, because he was more of a ceremonial magician, and he thought witchcraft was a bit, girly. He'd been a witch, but he decided he was going to be a ceremonial magician. And so he he said to get the Spiral Dance by Starhawk, which basically that was what introduced me to the Sabbats. And then we knew these people who lived in the country who were Alexandrian Wiccans, but I at the time didn't know that there were different types of Wiccans. I knew there was Wicca, but because Starhawk had never mentioned Alexandrians, and I hadn't read any British, I think I might have had Doreen Valiente's ABC of Witchcraft, but I didn't have any other, I'd never heard of the Farrars or anything. So we ended up moving up to the country and lived with these British traditional Wiccans who were Alexandrians. But even then, it wasn't clear to me. I didn't know the big differences between Gardnerianism and Alexandrianism, and we didn't really think about it that much. We were really more interested, or at least I was, in learning magic as a type of method to make things happen, to cause change in accordance with my will, because I should really say my boyfriend who taught me all this, he was a Thelemite as well. So I really had in fact, the first book I ever read before Starhawk, I read The Confessions of Aleister Crowley. And it was a ridiculously big, huge book. Actually, I've got it like right here behind me. I'm going to insist on you showing. It's right there. I don't know if you can. It's probably really blurry. Anyway, so the Confessions of Aleister Crowley, and I really didn't even know who he was, but I don't know why I thought I should read that, but I did. And it probably took months because it's so fat, and I probably didn't understand any of it. So so I was interested basically just in anything I could get. One of the sources, but it was basically these Wiccans, my boyfriend, and a guy. So my boyfriend, how we met these Wiccans was my boyfriend's friend Tim. His dad had been a witch, and he knew these Wiccans, but he had died, and we had inherited his book collection, and so I also basically just used to go through that book collection and, pick out things that looked interesting. Like there's a really good book called, it's called The Waxing Moon, A Gentle Guide to Magic by Helen Chappell. And it had these really nice drawings in it, line drawings, and you can still get it on, secondhand and things online. But I don't know if she ever became particularly famous or anything. So my first experience was really, ceremonial magic, American, like what I now know is reclaiming witchcraft with Starhawk through the book, The Spiral Dance, then meeting these Wiccans. And then those Wiccans that I met, they also introduced me to the alternative lifestyle scene in Australia, well, in the state that I'm in. So they were back to the earth people. They didn't have electricity. They lived in the middle of a forest. There was no hot water. We had to light fires if we wanted, to heat water up to have it. Well, they didn't really have plumbing, so you'd have to have a bath in like the dam, which is, I don't know if Americans use that word, the dam. Let's call it the pond. So that's how I first got into it. And because it's such a big topic and so interesting, so my boyfriend, he sort of had a curriculum that I was supposed to be following, but I also had my own interests that I would sort of research as well. And I do a ritual, or I design a ritual, and there might be something difficult that I didn't know, like, oh, should I put this in? And I'd say to him, well, if I put this in, if I do this, is this going to happen, or is this going to happen? And sometimes he wouldn't answer me. And I used to think, oh, he just wants me to work it out for myself. But it may very well have been that he actually didn't know the answer himself, and he just wanted to look cool. So I don't know.
So in your bio, it says that you've published a few different articles and also a book. Can you tell me about the first publication that you were published in, and then talk about your book and how our viewers would probably love to know where to get your book, probably Amazon. Can you talk about that?
Yep. So the first pagan publication I was ever in was called a magazine called Shadow Play, which was founded by Bill Beattie and Rhea. I'm not sure what her name was at the time. I think it was Rhea Loader. And they lived in Sydney, and they come from the fairy tradition. So a fairy priestess from America came to Australia in the 80s. And so they kind of studied with her. That was Valerie Voigt. So they had this magazine called Shadow Play, and so you'd write this article in pen on paper, and then you would mail it up to them, because I couldn't type or anything, and then they would type it up. And then Shadow Play did end up becoming a website for a lot of years, and it's actually just been revamped by Ria. She just told me recently. So Shadow Play is where I first got published, and that was in about 1986, and that was when I was living in the country, being a back to the earth hippie. And then, I kept writing for years and years. I really wanted to learn. I've always written for pagan publications, and I tried to write for as many as possible. And of course, now the paper pagan publications aren't as, don't exist as much as they used to, because of the boom in the internet. And there's a lot of young people who have probably never heard of any of these publications. Eventually, when I went to university, I had to learn how to do academic writing, which is really hard. It's still pretty hard. And my book, the book that I'm talking about in my bio, that is actually my PhD research. And because it's published by an academic publisher, it's quite expensive, but you can get a lot of free sort of segments of the book from my academia edu page. But also you can get the book in as a PDF if you have access to a university library, but a lot of people probably won't. But I can. Oh, that's a weird noise. I can get it in PDF form for people. So that would be for free, because it's expensive as an actual hard copy book. I've edited a couple of other academic books. Again, they're expensive, but I have 2 books in press with Theon Publishing in Munich, and they are going to be for an occult audience, and they will be, one of them at least will be coming out. I think it's the second book that Theon is putting out this year, and that's called The Night Queen. And that's a little bit related to my presentation for Witchcraft, for WitchCon, because what that is, it's about going within into your own self and using that as a resource, your ability to visualize or imagine or dream or trance, using that as a resource for finding or connecting with a historical tradition of witchcraft. So it's a little bit complicated. I'd have to explain it quite a bit to explain that better. But that's going to come out, this year. So again, it's not really telling people exactly what to do, but it gives it sets up these kind of visualizations based on a historical European form of what we could call shamanic or traditional witchcraft. That's got a lot of it happens in the imagination and in, say, on the astral plane and things like that. And it helps you to try and do that, and see how, and because instead of joining an external tradition, say like, British traditional witchcraft or something, this is really an internal shamanic journey type of thing. So, yeah.
So in the mid 80s, from modern times, as you've walked your path of magic, of the craft, of paganism, what has been your most significant awakening or life lesson that you've learned since you've been on your path?
Well, I think the thing is with Thelema is very starry. So the whole, I think Thelema has really got me into astronomy because, of course, pagan religions are about things that are real, like the earth or the sky. So I'm very into astronomy, and astronomy is that's the universe. That's the body of Nuit, the goddess, the Thelemic goddess. And so that, I guess I see what I call, witchcraft, and I use that term quite generally to mean magic working. I see witchcraft as having a mystical aspect where you're trying to relate and understand the universe as best as possible, and also a power aspect on the earth where you try and get things done the way you would like to do them through magic in whatever technique or tradition you're using. So I guess I'd say probably the mystical sort of relationship with the universe is very important to me. And I'm always trying, back on Earth, I'm always trying different techniques to try and, what's the best magical technique? Is this the best? Or can I, do this? Or how much effort do I need to put in? Do I need to do a really elaborate ritual, or can I do a much more abbreviated ritual, or can I just try and use mind power and, just try and make things happen with my mind? I think also studying magic and the universe, it shows you how much you don't know, and I think it can be it can produce confidence, but it can also make you feel quite dizzy because of the enormity of the universe. And yeah, I just watched a really good documentary with, that British, I think he's some sort of like an astrophysicist, Brian Cox, and he's such a good explainer of astronomy and the universe. And even the film, Stanley Kubrick's film 2001, that's also quite a holy experience if you're very into the body of Nuit, the goddess. Yeah. So what else? Magic also has a lot of self-analysis, and I think that's difficult. It's always difficult to analyze yourself because you tend to want to think good things about yourself, or then you'll be like overcritical and it was, you went out of control the other way. And I think I'm with magic also, you're never finished. There's so much to do. While you can achieve certain things and you can find out certain things and experience certain things, there's still, a lot more to do.
When it comes to books like Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy and Israel Regardie's book, The Golden Dawn, that he published, which one of those publications do you think has more of an impact on contemporary witchcraft, Agrippa or the Golden Dawn magical tradition?
Well, I'm a lot more familiar with the Golden Dawn tradition than Agrippa. I have had to look at Agrippa a little bit because of this particular exhibition that I've curated, which involves an artist called Barry William Hale, who's much more expert than me on that sort of thing. I don't know how much influence Agrippa would have had on contemporary occultism. Certainly he would have influenced the Golden Dawn itself. I think from my research, which may be right, may be wrong, from my research, it seems to me the Golden Dawn was so influential. The Golden Dawn is really the reason that we are all here now doing magic. Although there was a Renaissance magical tradition, that's a long time ago. Not obviously not as long ago as, the ancient world, but it's quite a long time ago. The Golden Dawn, the order of the Golden Dawn, and then, the publication of the Golden Dawn rituals and curriculum is much more recent. And I believe that has really been the influence on the rise of modern witchcraft and paganism, and possibly the boom in, it influenced the OTO as well. Of course, Crowley, he was in the Golden Dawn zone, and he's been a big influence. So I would probably have to say the Golden Dawn Israel Regardie publication has been more influential, in my opinion, but that might be wrong.
And we're getting at the bottom of the interview, but my last question I want to ask is, particularly a new seeker or of the craft, contemporary witchcraft, that is fascinated with the archaeological and academic approaches of the craft, what would be your advice to a younger seeker?
What should they do?
What would be your advice to them on their path if they're just starting out in their curiosities with modern day contemporary witchcraft in conjunction with archaeology, and a similar path that you walk, what would be your path? What would
Yeah.
be your advice to your younger self?
My advice to my younger self. Ooh. Let's see. Well, I didn't care that much about archaeology back then, and I didn't even know about it. So, but I would look at, basically, if I was going to start off the book in Witchcraft Today, God, there's just so many books now. I'd probably advise someone to get a pretty basic-ish how-to book, of which there are many, 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 many. And then there are, you could look at, say, particular deities that are, worked with in that book. Of course, it's a different story if they're going to go and join a group. Then they'll get taught from there, but I'm sure there'll still be books involved. So whether you go to someone's video course online, if you go to like real people and go and have classes, or if you just go to Amazon and purchase books, certainly. So read that, start practicing the exercises recommended in the book or by your teacher. And then when they talk about anything that may have an ancient precedent, say god names or angelic forces or planetary, anything like that, there's certainly gods. You can easily follow those up with research and say, for example, the Greek goddess Hecate, who a lot of people call Hecate. Anyway, Hecate, she's really, she's super popular at the moment. And a lot of people will go to recent books about her. But what else you can do is you can go beyond those books and go back to ancient sources. So, for example, she's not a Greek goddess, but she's mentioned in Greek literature. So she's in Hesiod's Theogony. She's in the Homeric hymn to Demeter. There's a lot of artwork of her. She also changes over time. So you could, because a lot of people really like her as a sort of a spooky magic goddess, but that's actually how she was in the Roman period. So early on, when the Greeks brought her into their pantheon, she was not a spooky goddess of magic. That's really a different period. So I think to an extent, sometimes archaeology and looking at the ancient world, or even interrogating any aspect of contemporary magic, can be destabilizing, because you often want something to just believe. You want to go, I just want to believe this. I don't want to have to think about it. I don't want to have to keep troubling my mind, realizing that there's more that I have to find out. I think the thing is with magic, I think if you're honest, you've got to accept that it is going to be troubling. There is going to be more to find out. Things might not be what you thought they were. What you find out you might not like. It's all just grist to the mill. But with, say, a goddess who changes over time, you might go, okay, I really like Hecate in her spooky, magical underworld aspect. I know early on she was a bit different to that. I choose to work with her in this particular aspect. And I think, I just think with contemporary paganism, you owe it to yourself to be aware of how these gods were perceived in the ancient world by the people who kind of worked with them in, when this was the religion going on, which it isn't now, only amongst us pagans. When it was the religion of society, say in ancient Greece, how were these deities perceived and treated, and how did they behave, and what do the texts say about them? And all these things are available in English. And they are, there's just so many, I don't know if who's doing videos on that sort of thing, but there's just so many resources now for anyone who wants to know anything. There's just like a bazillion resources. There's probably a lot of academics who also write about this sort of thing, who try and bridge, because some academics are not pagan, so they don't really tend to bother trying to explain anything to pagans, but some academics are pagan and they have an interest in explaining and helping contemporary pagans bridge the gap. Because a lot of academic work is not available unless you have access to a university library to get the electronic articles, but a lot of it is, and a lot of people do. It's called engagement. It's where you're meant to engage with non-academic audiences. But with, say, researching a goddess like Hecate, the books about her, so Hesiod's Theogony, Homeric Hymn to Demeter, other books about her are totally available. They're not like books you couldn't get, secondhand or new or anything like that. So some people don't want to research, or some people find that tiring. You don't have to do that. But if you like doing that, it's a fun and pleasurable thing to do, although it is very time consuming.
Caroline, thank you so much for coming on the Lone Wolf Show right here on www.witchcrafttv.online. Caroline reads tarot and is a regular workshop facilitator on a range of magical subjects. Visit Caroline Tully online at necropolisnow.blogspot.com and make sure you sign up for her WitchCon presentation on witchcon.com. Thank you so much for coming on the show, in a wonderful evening or morning to you in Australia, and a wonderful evening to our viewers in the United States. Thank you so much. Blessed be, Mary Part, and I'll see you at WitchCon.
Thank you.